3, 2, 1.
What's that?
That's too much. That's too much, guys.
Tone
That's
it
too
down.
Much, too much Monday morning. Got it.
Okay, no jingle. We're just going straight into it.
Really?
Yes.
No jingle.
Do you want the jingle?
I feel like we need the jingle.
All right, so I'm wearing your t-shirt again for the second time, Andre.
Are you? Dude, stop it.
The anointing is going to rub off on that one.
Take it off. Take it
Be
off
like,
right now.
Like right
Benny
now.
Hinn
That'd be crazy.
Be like Benny
Yeah, take
Hinn
it off.
visiting Catherine Kuhlman's grave. It's going to be
Yeah.
full of the anointing.
It's gonna be full. You're gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be fine. We just gotta get you this t-shirt, and you'll be good.
But that t-shirt doesn't look like it's going to fit me, Mike.
I
'Cause
was
it looks
thinking
like
the
it
same
fits you
thing. I
pretty
think you should
nicely.
just donate it to me. It looks like I might have got it a little bit small. I don't know,
It does seem that way.
but
That's not XXL.
no. It's like because it just slipped my mind that you might need a slightly bigger one, and then I guess that just gets me 2 t-shirts though.
Yeah.
One
Now I just gotta figure out how to get next one as well.
Funny
Then I
how
got-
things just work out sometimes, Mike. But
It
sometimes
is
they
funny.
They just work out that way.
I think so. So we are just thinking about Pactum. I know we're doing some free rep for Pactum here, but we love it.
Why?
Let me just say again, I am drinking my Pactum Yeti, and that's why everything is so good. And life is so sweet these days. But we also, I just spoke to Mike Ebendrath. He's No Compromise Radio, who is connected to the Pactum because it's the brotherly thing. And so he's open to do a pod soon, so that's great. So
Cool.
we'll sort that out pronto, and I'm really looking forward to that one. It'll be great. Good. How was the preach, Andre? We got to ask. Everyone cares.
I tell you what, this morning, one of our elders, Stuart, preached a cracker from Habakkuk. He's going through Habakkuk at the moment.
Oh, you
And that's
didn't even
been
preach.
fantastic. I didn't preach this morning.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it was great. Just sitting down, I had my notes out and I'm just writing stuff down. It's great.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. It was like a EMA level preach. It was fantastic.
Nice.
And
Nice one,
then,
Stuart.
yeah, that's Stuart.
EMA is a
So then-
conference in the UK.
It's good. It's a good conference.
I've been there.
Mike wasn't there. We were there together.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
do you remember?
I don't remember.
Do you remember
I
how we
remember
went
Mike
around
wasn't
London?
there. I remember the
to
good
all the
time we had when Mike wasn't there. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember it too.
I just thank God for the common grace of perceptual blocking.
So yeah, so it's good. And then this evening we're looking at the eternal Son of God. So thinking about the Son of God, as he was in eternity, thinking about the Godhead, thinking about pre-creation, just who he is in himself, the character attributes of the Son of God. So yeah, it was good. No, we actually had a decent turnout. I had a pastor friend come and check it out. Just nice to see him there. We had a good number of our young people turn out. So actually, it was good. It was a good night. Yeah,
Good. You're looking good. I mean, you're looking smart.
Yeah, well,
How is the waistcoat thing working? Is it like the strategy? I know it was a bit of a strategy. And
The waistcoat, I will never go back on, because if you tie it tight enough, it's like someone is hugging you all the time. And everyone needs a hug,
especially pastors on Sundays.
especially pastors on Sundays. So like guys come in, I had some really strange stuff said to me this morning. I mean, it was a crazy morning. Like we had all kinds of things going on. We had like seriously, like, I don't know, like verging on the demonic. Like, I mean, it was crazy stuff happening this morning. So yeah, I needed my hugs, bro. So this is great. I'm just like walking around with someone like literally just.
It's
hugging
such a
me
good
all
idea.
day.
I know.
I know. And listen, I don't know why guys don't wear. There's 2 things I don't understand. Why do guys not have beards, and why do they not wear waistcoats?
Well,
This
here's the thing about waistcoats for me. Here's why I don't like waistcoats. They make me look too formal. I feel too formal. I feel like people think, like, who the heck are you? Why would you even wear a waistcoat? It's not
simple solution, bro. Simple solution is you dress it down. So you wear you first of all, you get a waistcoat that's not like this one. You get a waistcoat that's like a fisherman's waistcoat. It's like a bit rugged. It's like that kind of blue vibe. Then you dress it down with some loafers. Yeah, you wear like some super cas shoes with some jeans. It looks rad.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got the right picture of a fisherman's waistcoat, bro.
What?
Like a fisherman's waistcoat's got like
oh no, I don't mean one of the jackets. I don't mean one of the camo jackets. No, I mean if you go back
oh, the old tweed ones.
Think like an 1800s fisherman in France. That's what I'm thinking of. You know,
with the deer hunter hat.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah,
that was so obvious now that you said it.
Yeah, exactly. You know what
right. So okay, yeah, no, I like that. But you still gotta like tuck your shirt in, and it's like all weird, and I don't know.
Buy short shirts.
Nice. Then you look like a Backstreet Boy.
You know, or you could just not wear a shirt. Do that old thing.
That would just be shocking. All right. Anyway,
Nick knows what I'm talking about.
Okay, so I mean, I think it should be a thing. So because we've got this so close, we're recording so close to our Sundays, we need to at least ask about how our Sundays went. So now GraceNet knows that if I pitch up with a fisherman from France waistcoat, they know what's going on. I'm experimenting. But I do think, just for the pastor's attire is quite a thing. It's worthy of a whole show on its own, because it's sort of like, I'm all about bring back the Geneva robe, man. I mean, the simplicity of it all. You just throw that thing on, because as a pastor, you don't want to be like a spectacle, but you also just can't like look like trash every Sunday. And there is a stage of life where I felt like I could pull that off with the t-shirt and jeans for a long time, but it's just sort of like it gets old, I suppose, when you start getting gray hair and wrinkles.
Well, you just you have to start acting like an adult and dressing like an adult.
I really don't feel any of that pressure. I got to be honest with you. I could quite easily be the guy who just wears whatever I wore when I was 18 all the way through, but it's sort of like, I'm just aware that it becomes a distraction. It becomes like almost a statement that I don't necessarily want to be making. I don't want to be like, hey, look at me, I'm refusing to grow up and that sort of thing. But like, I don't feel the pressure to grow up either. So it's a kind of a weird space. I feel like this awkward thing. So waistcoats might be the solution. I've got these cool little it works during winter, but like New Zealand summer gets so hot while you preach. Like the only alternative would be, but I was going to say I had these little, what do they call, like these vest jersey things, sleeveless ones. So you can wear them. They're brilliant for preaching because you don't get too hot. But yeah, like summer, I'm back to like t-shirts and jeans. So everyone's just got to deal with it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right. So we can talk about my stupid book now? Or...
No way. It's not stupid at all. I was thinking when you advertise this, you should probably put PhD part 1, PhD part 2, because the headings probably won't give it away. Just tag it onto the way that you line it up on YouTube or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's no longer a PhD. Now it's just a book.
Yeah,
we'll just call it. We'll call it. What would be the abbreviation? Covenant Law in Cultic 96. CLCB part 1.
Part 1.
Yeah.
All right.
Good. So we've already done the intro with Leons.
With Leons. So this would be
part 1 is done. So this is technically part 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we're looking at chapters 1 and 2. So if anyone wants to read the book, these episodes will sort of give you a great summary intro to those chapters, and so feel free to read along.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say now we're not going to get through chapter 1. I'm just going to say that now.
Well, we might get through like more than one chapter. We'll just see how we go. This is not going to be as structured. This is not going to be as structured. Okay. All right, slow it down. Whatever.
I'm going to slow it down.
So
that's the point.
So maybe I do think we need to go a little bit deeper than Mike wants to go, because he's just wants to vomit every time he hears these things because he's so sick of all the stuff. But from the point of view, but I do think from the point of view of setting people up to appreciate the book, there is a bit of foundational work we need to do.
Okay. I'm in your hands. Is that a hard copy you're flipping around there?
Me?
Yeah. I'm hearing real pages now. You got a Kindle version.
These are my notes.
Okay, good. I was thinking, like, did you buy $100 like real one? I
must get one. Yeah.
No, I
need you to sign it and put a personal note in.
Oh, I will totally put your personal. It's coming at you. See, there it is. Your one right there. I was somewhere around there. I can't point to the right direction, but there it is. Oh, there we go. There. I'll point. There's yours. And there's yours.
In 10 years' time, when I visit you, I'll come pick it up.
That's great.
You're preaching in June. Let's not forget that. Yeah. All right. Good. Now,
yeah. So chapter 1, introduction, the need for the study.
Yes.
The need for the study. So basically, what we the way that you set it up in this chapter is you talk about the need for clarity on the mission and the mandate, which has a nice ring to it. I think we should probably use that for like a conference title or something.
It'd be great for 2 talks. Yeah.
Mandate.
It'd be great for 2 talks. It's just if you want to have a third talk, it might be difficult.
Well, no. No, we've been through this. This is our pretend surprise on the issue, and we've actually worked this through. We all have. We only have 2 talks. I get what you're saying.
Okay. Right. Back to the book. So clarity on the mission and the mandate. Why do we need the study? Why is this book important? It's because of the breakdown, at least in Reformed thought, across all of evangelicalism, even worse, on what is the mission of the church and how does that relate to the cultural mandate. So maybe in your first chapter, you sort of lay out the landscape of the different views. So maybe we could just throw these names out, throw these words out, begin to define them, and then they become working terms for us as we move forward. So basically, you've got a number of conversation partners. So you've got R2K. What does R2K stand for, Mike?
Yeah, Reformed 2 Kingdoms.
So it doesn't stand for Radical 2 Kingdoms?
Well, to some people it does. You know, that so R2K it's the I mean, I don't know that anyone really it seems like that label has fallen away a little bit. But anyway,
it was recently used by the New Founders co-host.
Yeah, okay. Whenever you hear it, whenever I hear it used, I'm always wondering because it leaves you wondering, like, what does the R stand for?
You know, is it made up by John Frame? I'm pretty sure Frame labeled it as Radical 2 Kingdoms.
Yeah, totally. No, a lot of people would come at it from so that's what I'm saying. Like when you see it, like when they don't actually specify this is the Reformed 2 Kingdom position, then you're sort of like, okay, this is a big question mark. Where's this guy going?
What's going on?
But I found that most people in favor of the position will say the word.
Yeah.
You know, not so leave that ambiguity.
What's the difference, Mike, between Reformed 2 Kingdom and just 2 Kingdom? I mean, why are we
that's an important question. I feel like
before
we have covered this.
Before we get there, all right. Let me carry on just checking out. Let's look at all our conversation partners and then we'll draw down into Luther's view. So we've got R2K, Reformed 2 Kingdom, not Radical 2 Kingdom. Radical 2 Kingdom is usually used by some sort of theonomist influence critique.
Yeah.
We reject that label. We do not identify with it. Then you got Neo-Calvinism. So maybe let's just put some meat on the bone of that. We know that Lee Irons is going to talk to us a bit more about that later on, but let's just give a little teaser. What is Neo-Calvinism?
Yes, man, I'm looking forward to that second run up with Lee. But so Neo-Calvinism is again, it's quite a slippery term, and you have to be careful to define it properly. Like you often, I mean, the word neo just means new, and Calvinism, so it could come across like, and it has actually been used talking about like the new Calvinists, the wave of the John Piperites and the Driscolls and whatnot, which is so not what we're talking about. So if anyone does hear that, just make sure not to go in that direction. We're thinking here about like, in-house Reformed thought historically, and we're thinking about particularly the Dutch tradition that starts to emerge post-Reformation, almost
post
19th century, post-Enlightenment, and you have a group of key thinkers. Of the most famous, I think, is Abraham Kuyper. Most people kind of know him. He has to take some responsibility for what happens there, even if people go way beyond what he himself said. And he just starts to play with some of these concepts that were just in vogue at the time. You've got Kant's thinking that everyone's processing. You've got the post-enlightenment speech and philosophy, I suppose, is what everyone's working with. You've got this pull away from Christianity, and he's trying to sort of use Christianity as the counterpart worldview and a way to be able to solve things better than those opposing philosophers, humanist philosophers and Enlightenment philosophers were saying. And so you had here, we all know his sphere sovereignty and his whole idea of the sovereignty of God, kind of covenant Lord idea is really front and center for him, which we at that level have no problem with. But then when it starts getting a little bit crazy is when he starts allowing these philosophical concepts like this holistic worldview theory philosophy that everything must come from a single starting point, everything must be reduced to a single starting point, everything must be accounted for by the whole, and are not at all happy with any levels of duality in their system. Everything's going to be singular and whole and holistic, and so that starts to kind of impede on their thinking process and moves them away a little bit from your classical theology up until that point, which perhaps was a little bit, it was happier, albeit from a place that we might disagree with, even if it is, we're talking there about the, grace is added to nature and so forth. There was just a happiness with a duality that was present in the thinking up until that point. And so that starts evolving. And then you've got the thinkers after Kuyper. I mean,
let me throw out the name. So in your book, you mentioned, Skilder,
which
is anti-piety, anti-common grace sort of
guy. Right.
Then you've got Doyevet with his cosmonic project.
Then
following him, you had Mita,
who
was all governments should be Christian.
And
following him, you have sort of the publicist Schaeffer, who popularized all these things.
Exactly, yeah.
And then you got the Walters and Plantinga, and then Smith. So you those are just some of the names that are associated with neo-Calvinism. And as we read and think in these areas, whenever you hear a quote from those guys, you need to know what camp they're coming from.
Yeah, and to be, I mean, those guys were, they're moving in explicitly that kind of, I would say, let's before we talk about them, let's talk about Doyevet, because he's the guy who, took one step further than Kuyper, in my opinion, and just really, he wanted to rid this ground motive of any sense of duality at all. And so that's where it really starts, impeding on the system. And even if you could argue that Doyevet himself was able to keep some level of tension, I think post Doyevet, that's where it does start getting, Klein does direct a little bit of his attention to these neo-Doyevedians out there, these mysterious guys that, perhaps were in Canada or perhaps somewhere else or whatever. Or you just have these guys who have popularized some version of Doyevet's thinking. So he really becomes the kind of the filter through of Kuyperian thought. From that point, it starts getting into what we see in the guys you've just mentioned.
So I mean, just the impression that I get reading your book and then just going on YouTube, for example.
Yes.
So, the real discussion with the adults is between R2K and neo-Calvinism.
Yes.
And then at the popular level, there's Doug Wilson. So, you've got R2K, you've got neo-Calvinism, and then it comes into the post-millennial theonomic, theonomy brand. So let's talk theonomy for a moment. Let's bring it down to the sort of...
Yeah. Hang on, but before we go there, can we just quickly... Sorry,
and also, I was just on the popularizers of Doyevet's thinking, we've mentioned a few names there, but it also should be said that it really is the dominant landscape. So when as it starts bleeding into transformationalist thinking and so forth, and it's even and this is where it does have this interesting blend with neo-Calvinism, the other kind, in that they've all adopted Keller and all of these guys that are transformationalists and really have borrowed all of these concepts from Nancy Pearcey and what's her name? Nancy Pearcey. That's wrong when I said it. All these guys who have just basically, popularized even further, perhaps not holding fast to like central Dutch tenets of theology so much, but it is the dominant reformed way of processing.
Even I would say, I would even put founders, the present. You've got the whole public theologian movement.
Yes, exactly.
The present public theologian movement would be a sort of neo-Calvinist.
Yeah. So they're all coming out of that Dutch stream. So it's always, a way to shorten the whole thing is just go everyone except for Van Drunen
and Horton
and Horton and the guys Hart. We like and us, by the way.
And the Westminster, California, basically.
Yeah. So we are in a minority. I think it is changing a little bit. I think that we might see a few people just go, okay, we'll see what happens with this whole like post-COVID world vibe where I think things are being polarized now more than they were, in that people are really wanting to push back and give it a go, and other people are really seeing how stupid that is. So in some ways, there could be
Jonathan Lehman and
yes.
Mark Dever. They would be, they've got a Two Kingdoms framework.
Yes, and Lehman's book Political Church, which was kind of like skirting the issue for a little bit there. I think we'll lean more. His way of thinking will lean more in our direction as we go.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah.
So I mean, just to put it into perspective, that's where the academic discussion is taking place. I mean, that's so if you're going to want to pick up books on theory, you really got to dig into these guys. If you think you're going to become an expert on these issues by watching YouTube, you're not.
No. So which guys are you thinking about? Which guys are you thinking about?
So I've had conversations with many young men.
No, I mean, like, which thinkers are you thinking about?
Well, you got to start with Kuyper, and you got to recognize that there is a spectrum of views within neo-Calvinism. We come to modern new Calvinist expressions in Keller.
Yeah.
So you got the whole gambit going on there.
And that's true. And I think
there's nuance going on in all of those places. And
really, if you do want to get into it, David is the guy. I think he is. Many people would look at that the beginning of that thinking. I mean, a lot of people will get into Kuyper because he's a lot easier in some ways than David. But David's really that nexus point, I suppose.
Yeah.
Can I just ask about Kuyper, because Kuyper, he seems to be quite ambiguous on a lot of stuff, and I hear a lot of people claim him both ways.
Yeah.
Like, what's your take on Kuyper and where he actually stands on, like how, like, can he be claimed in any sense for the Two Kingdom stuff, or is he totally on the neo-Calvinist side? Like,
I think Kuyper can. I mean, he's still got a foot in the old world in that way. He is very much thinking. I mean, it's, if anyone wants to read, I mean, it doesn't take a long time to figure this out either. You read Common Grace by Kuyper, for example, and he'll set these things out. In fact, there was a recent book on neo-Calvinism. I forget the authors' names, the two authors.
Yeah, it's a big term. Yeah.
Anyway, so I've recently just read it, and I'll try and remember to put it in the show.
Grace and Common podcast, guys. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Very good book, and they're very helpful in terms of just spelling out exactly. I think they're, as far as they're more specialized in Kuyper than I've ever become, but they put Bavinck there with Kuyper, and they think about him and what he said, and I mean, you see there as they're portraying him exactly the kind of thing that you see when you read through Kuyper, which is that he's he's very classical in the way that he approaches things. Is Common Grace piece, it holds it together in terms of he's happy with the sense of duality. It's sort of conflicting with perhaps the seed thought in his holistic worldview theory, but he's able to hold this tension well. And I think as Klein read Kuyper, for example, like, he wouldn't have had too many worrisome thoughts pop up. The difficulty was that in that culture, Kuyper was a lot like maybe even Kelvin, we could say, and that there was a kind of difference in the way it worked out. And he was a little bit, he has to take responsibility, as I say, for some of the stuff that gets thrown on him ultimately, because his rhetoric betrays that he actually just, he wants more than his theology is allowing for at that point. So that's why I do think he can be claimed by both, camps, as can Kelvin almost, because you've got Kelvin, the theorist, at one level, his systematics, where he's talking happily about this two kingdom dynamic. And yet when it came down to working in Geneva and doing his thing,
small consistory was very active with pastors on it.
Things definitely took a more active note. So, but he's working within the context of Christendom and so forth. So again, you've got to almost separate the practice from the theory at some degree without discrediting each one of these guys. They obviously were able to hold it together. But I do. I like Piper. I like Kuyper. I like Piper too. As my daddy. not on this issue particularly, but Kuyper is worth reading. I mean, I love reading his stuff. So, and I'm like a rabid Two Kingdom guy. So that's got to say something. There are times, like, I don't know, I think it might have been translated, but this was the one thing I worked through in Dutch, which was great. It was
Ons program.
Yes. But his rhetoric against the idea of theocracy, theonomy at least, against the idea of a church-state blend. I mean, it is Afrikaans and you know what I mean. I mean, those guys, they get Bliksem, you know. I mean, it's like, I mean, he just starts railing into these guys, and you could see very clearly that for whatever Kuyper was wanting to do, he was not. Like, it's so ironic that the theonomists hold him as some sort of, you know, patron saint, when in fact he would chew them to death. You could see that with yeah. And so that's where it does get wrong, and that's where I think everyone should say that Kuyper was not on the same page. Bolt does a lot of good work on Kuyper as well, and he makes that point forcefully and correctly, I think.
Okay, great. So, I mean, just putting it into perspective, just helping people understand the landscape. So, R2K and Neo-Calvinism are brothers of the same family.
Yeah.
We both believe that Christ is the Lord of everything, that there's no part of this world that doesn't belong to Christ. But where Kuyper had some of the DNA of a two kingdoms view, where he recognized that God rules differently in common grace than he does in the church.
Yeah.
Two kingdoms is really pushing
sphere
forward
sovereignty.
That
really was a form of two kingdoms, if you think about it.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah. And
so if you endorse sphere sovereignty, that's, you know, depending on how you emphasize it, you could be two kingdoms.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of interesting.
It's not opposed to two kingdoms.
Just to rabbit trail this for a second, you know what's crazy is that you see the theonomists pegging Doivert with Klein because of their divorcing of these realms.
Yeah,
you know, because Doivert's taking Kuyper, and he's like, you know, putting some steroids on it, and so the sphere sovereignty gets even more spherized.
How ironic.
I know, and it's so funny that you know, there they are talking about church and state, and I'm like, you know, I like that part of Doivert. You know, it's good. It's like he's really, you know, obviously he wants to bring it together in this greater concept, but you know, it seems quite two kingdomish at certain points, and it's so interesting that the guys would pick up on that and go, oh, Doivert and Klein, you got to avoid those guys for the two kingdom reason. And here we are squabbling, you know. Anyway, so
okay, so moving on then to RTK.
Well, hang on, Nick. Just I really do feel like now would be a good time to differentiate between Reformed two kingdom and two kingdom, because just the summary, we can dig into it later, but like we've thrown it around a lot, and I just think R2K, why even talk like that? Why not?
No, it is a good point. We do need to think about it. Okay. So because it's a different thing, and Lutherans freak out when we start talking this way as well. And we got to help the Lutherans. We love the Lutherans, right? So we've got to work with them. They, you know, because they'll come along. I mean, because the two kingdom dynamic starts right in the beginning. It's not reformed in any stretch. You know, it's obviously pre-reform, pre-reformation. It's just the church in some way trying to find its, you know, the way that it works in the world. So you see this paradigm, as I've called it in the book, just netting itself out all the way through. All these things we've talked about in the past, you know, the letter to Epistle to Diognetus, you know, just whatever, City of God even falls in this category. It's just this broader way of processing. And then you get to even with Calvin and the squabble there about what was Calvin, what was Luther. You know, it's an interesting discussion, and it's definitely framed correctly in light of this two kingdom paradigm. But they're not basing it on covenant theology at all. That's not how they're processing this whole thing. So that's why you need to distinguish this reformed two kingdom kind of thing, because they're going, okay, we see the paradigm, we see its helpfulness, but we're approaching it from a distinctly reformed perspective, in that it's like coming out of a reformed covenant theology. Now it's true that the question mark, you know, is there, well, what kind of covenant theology are we talking about here within the reformed world? And that's kind of where you get into this Dutch versus, you know, Reformed two kingdom squabble, because really at the end of the day, what my book's trying to show is that there are two different covenant theologies at the base of it. So that's the way to distinguish it, though. I think if the idea of two kingdoms is being driven by idea of a covenant of redemption, you know, which is regulating and governing the people of God unto eternity, and a covenant of common grace, which is regulating the common affairs. And Jesus is obviously the administrator of both covenants. He is the king. There's one king, but there are two, in a sense, two kingdoms moving forward because of these two covenants. That's distinctive. That's a reformed two kingdom idea.
Right. So it's a covenant driven distinction.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas Luther would be, you know, a Christendom thinker who had some inner and outer distinctions.
So his is like, he's looking in terms of you know, the internal world versus the external world, the world that is justified before God versus the world that,
and he looks through the lens of the law gospel distinction at who does what in those realms, as opposed to how does covenant theology give us a larger framework to
so
answer
he's like
the big questions.
Even with the law gospel thing, I mean, he's approaching the whole thing as these like timeless principles, right? They're these abstract, timeless, ontological sort of principles, and that's how law gospel gets imposed on everything, and it just separates that way. Whereas with reform thinking, I mean, it's all coming out of redemptive historical understandings of the way things work, and that's why covenants are interwoven with the whole process, because we don't just understand these random principles, we understand it to emerge. Law emerges by way of the covenant of works. It emerges in our understanding grace by the way of the covenant of redemption and the covenant of grace as they work together. So that again is a distinctive point that separates. It's sort of like we start and we overlap a little bit with the Lutherans, but it's kind of like we're just approaching it in different ways.
And the other that's really helpful, and the other guy that gets thrown into the mix. So I mean, you got Luther, who's obviously drawn into this discussion. You got Calvin, who's drawn into it. You got Kuyper, who's drawn into it. But the other guy who also gets, I don't know if now's the time to go into this, is Augustine. He also gets drawn into this. I mean, does the city of God, city of man thing, I know it's not a straightforward one-for-one thing, but is there any sense in which that is leading one way or the other?
Well, he's dealing by way of antithesis with this whole problem. So he's going the city of God, city of man, right? And if you think about this Reform to Kingdom thing, what it's doing, the big squabble is actually about the common grace idea, which is not even there in.
It's like the area in between,
right. Yeah. So it's de facto there in Augustine, not
Augustine.
Okay, no, I'm just. I just say Augustine, and there's no ways I'm getting out of that. So just let's pick a team. So there's this de facto overlap. Obviously, the overlap is that here we are, right? Like we are just stuck for a little bit in this time, this current age, and there is a belligerence. There is a toleration of one another. There is a something along those lines, but there's no articulation, so to speak, of this whole idea of common grace, which it's actually a legitimate reality. This is what the neo-Calvinists really don't like, that we're saying that, if they use the language of common grace, they're saying, yes, it's a little a pause, a little moment
of the church for the church to do its job with.
Exactly. Like you've got a little moment there and God's giving you a window, go for it, but in terms of anything legitimate as it stands, they've burst into flames.
They can't allow Nero to be the emperor. He must be overthrown.
Exactly. Ultimately, you could allow him to be the emperor if you can't overthrow him, and it's clear that you can't overthrow him. But as soon as that window opens, well, that's common grace, brother. You got to go for it, and that's not what we're talking about at all. And so it does leave a little question as to what would Augustine have thought about that idea. I don't know, but I read it. I did read it. I did give it some thought, and I think that he might, because you see the way it does move in Roman Catholic thinking, and the way they're dealing with the two kingdom paradigm by way of the church is basically Christendom, okay. And within Christendom, you got the sword, and you got the government with the sword, right? The kingdom of the sword, and you got the kingdom of the church. But it's all within Christendom. There is no unbeliever in their way of processing it.
Everyone's born and baptized,
right? Exactly. So it's again a very strange thing to try and translate into our world, because they don't deal with the same categories. And then with Augustine, you have that a little bit more, because he's recognizing that there are those beyond the church in that book, which is good. But again, it's almost like you get the impression all the way through that the best you can come up with is not a legitimate realm, but more just we must wait and be patient, and set our hope on what is to come. Maybe I should also say that my reading of Augustine, and that doesn't count for a lot, but just for having given it some thought, and I did. That's like one of the books that I already tried to read through quite carefully. Was that your impression at the end is that it's not, okay, let's go and overthrow the government and make the Pope famous. It is it's really the opposite. It's kind of like, if they tear down Rome, who cares? This is not where we live. This is not ultimately our home. So be prepared to be like the patriarchal sojourners, and set your eyes on the world to come. That's our true heavenly city. So that, and that does make sense in light of his context, where they're just ripping Rome apart, and he's just wanting them to know that, like, who cares? Let them come. This is not where our world is anyway. So yeah, it's like, how do you translate that? It's difficult.
Yeah, different categories there, different questions that he's answering.
Yeah.
So coming back to our conversation partners then, so we've looked at R2K, Neo-Calvinism, we've done some nuance and spectrums there. Now we want to talk about theonomy. So, so Reconstructionism, theonomy, postmillennial,
mono-covenantal. I think because all these kind of terms are all kind of like thrown around together, aren't they? Like, you got transformationalists, you got mono-covenantal, you got theonomist, you've got post-mill, like, and so I like, are they all just synonymous of the same thing? Like, I mean,
because you get theoretical mono-covenantalists, and you've just got practical outworking mono-covenantalists, people who deny it in theory, but actually that's the way it works out according to their covenant theology.
An interesting piece to read that's quite short. Well, it's not that short, but it's in response to Klein from Bonson, who, because Klein came out full guns blazing against the enemy. Shortish piece, just basically making, the kinds of claims we're quite used to, saying you're mixing up, it's post-millennialism, it's everything, the eschatology is wrong, Israel is being treated as a norm, and so he's just like throwing it all on the table. And what Bonson took exception to, and it's just kind of, you make of it what you will, but he said, well, firstly, Klein has been unfair in lumping all of this together, as if, like, I'm just, I hold to all of these things in a synonymous way and indiscriminately and whatnot. And there are different thinkers within theonomy, and there's a whole big range. I think that is probably a good point to keep in mind. But we as Kleinians can't help seeing what Klein saw. We just, because we know the implications and we know where these guys go with all of this stuff. And so even if they skirt around the issue and want to kind of isolate it to win one argument at a time, it is the accumulative force that we're seeing and have a problem with. So, in some sense, you want to say, no, they're not synonymous, but my goodness, like, for example, mono-covenantalism, you're going to struggle to find that, laid out very clearly in Bonson, for example. But I mean, he eventually ends up there. We know that, and everyone can feel it. And it's not in his writing per se. There are some moments,
but he endorses, and he's warm to Shepherd, who teaches it.
And even that sort of becomes sort of an after the fact point, though. And so if you're just limited to what he wrote, theory, we could say, he's been very, very careful and very, very guarded. But there are some moments that he slips up. I think that, but again, not like plaguing major mono-covenantal issues that you might imagine are there. But they do come along. And Klein saw that, we see it, everyone sees it. And so it's just frustrating because, they are all connected, without a doubt. And yet,
so speaking of mono-covenantalism, here's a definition I want to run past you, brothers. So someone is defining the covenant of grace, and he says, to keep it simple, let us call the covenant of grace God's solemn oath of salvation in and by Jesus Christ, conditioned upon obedient faith that bonds his people to one another and himself. I should add that I take the old covenant and the new covenant simply as different administrations of this one covenant of grace.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that is almost just a normal reform position. I would say mono-covenantalism pushes one step further even from that, in that the opening line there, how did you word it? It is the covenant of salvation, or?
Oath of salvation and by Jesus Christ, conditioned upon obedient faith.
Yeah, so I would say that strict mono-covenantalism it's not just the old and new covenant that are monoizing, it's the pre-fall and post-fall ideas that are monoizing as well. So there's no covenant of works, covenant of grace. They're all just one
covenant of grace, no covenant of words.
Right. So they wouldn't even necessarily have the word salvation in there, because that restricts it only to what happened after the fall.
I guess I was zeroing in on the covenantal nomism of this phrase, conditioned upon
Yes. Oh, well, of course.
Obedient faith.
But now, how do they get to that? How do they get to that sort of way of processing the covenant of grace? Well, it's because they've basically included the covenant of works as the same constituent.
They have a cookie cutter approach to all the covenants, so they're all very similar rather than different.
Exactly. So look, now, and the way they talk about it is,
so that's Jared Longshaw, who left Founders recently, who's now with Doug Wilson at Moscow.
Woo! Okay. There we go.
But that's Moscow's where this all leads. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter where you hop on the train. The train gets off at Moscow.
Right. You know? And that's to your point earlier, as in, like,
we always knew it. Communism is wrong.
Even if it's reformed communism.
Yeah.
They just had the wrong beast in the book of Revelation. Wasn't that Moscow? It was this Moscow.
I know, it's so funny. Of all names. So yeah, but they talk about grace. It's not that the grace begins after the fall. Grace is always there. It's just the kind of grace that's different, right? So and that's how they want to sort of frame it usually. And Frame is the guy who actually said that.
So we'll come to Frame in a moment. So maybe just to sort of isolate theonomy for a moment. So beginning with Rushduni, I guess, mid 20th century. Under Reconstructionism, then theonomy, Barnson theonomy. And then, a little bit of postmillennial sprinkled in. And now you've got postmillennial theonomy 2.0 or Federal Vision Light in Doug Wilson.
Yes.
And so
just for the uninitiated trying to listen into this, what does postmill got to do with this? So how does postmill fit into the whole thing?
Yeah, very good. So I mean, that has to do with the question around what is the relationship between the kingdom of Christ and the millennium? So Christ, or the second coming of Christ and the millennium. So the millennium is the kingdom of Christ manifest, and so Christ comes after the kingdom has first arrived. So kingdom first, then Christ's arrival. So Jesus comes after the millennium has already gotten here, which means that their expression of millennialism has to take some sort of earthly form.
Christ,
whereas amillennialism is a spiritual millennialism, where we see the intermediate state as we enter with the first resurrection. We sit with Christ on his throne in the intermediate state.
So to tie it into the book title, Covenant Lord and Cultic Boundary, the Covenant Lord is the thing there. Christ has to be king now so that his rule is expressed as per one would expect in a millennial rule of Christ. He hasn't returned yet, but what would it look like for Christ to sit on the throne and rule in this world for 1,000 years?
Yeah.
Well, so that's going to take some cultural engagement right there. So there's no cultic boundary. You're just going for it, and
or at least you're expecting an increasing cultic boundary. So
coterminous with
so if every square inch of this world belongs to the Lord Jesus Christ as king, therefore the Mosaic law should be ruling all governments,
just like Israel did. There you are. The whole world has to be Israel. That's the whole idea. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
cool. So then we move to frame and perspectivalism. So here's a distinct conversation partner, which is connected to neo-Calvinism, connected to transformationalism, connected to some sort of practical mono-covenantalism as he engages with Barnson, but his own unique voice and a critic of R2K. So let's maybe put that into perspective.
Yeah, he's an important guy because he's obviously been very, very influential, again, as it sort of moves into the more other kind of neo-Calvinist. They've used, like Keller and Frame have been massive in the way that, people just have processed theology and stuff. But Frame, he would himself, he would see himself sitting there somewhere between neo-Calvinism and theonomy in terms of a spectrum of views. He's not quite happy to be, as forthright about things as the theonomist is, and he wants to be more subtle on certain areas, which makes sense because of his distinct methodology. And then, he's not quite with the neo-Calvinists in that he's getting there in a different way. He doesn't like where Duivit has gone with the sphere sovereignty stuff and all of that. And so the way he gets where he is going is completely different from the way everyone else is doing it, and which is important to say because yes, it kind of looks like he's right there and it's just a small little nuance, but actually he's like coming at it from a completely different hermeneutic. and he's actually formed his own kind of covenant theology as well, which is, as far as I'm aware, completely unique to Frame. It's just like this whole, he wants to undercut the covenant of works by creating a covenant of creation, so that even if the covenant of works goes wrong as per Klein, still the idea of Sabbath eschatology remains. And it's just like this really strange idiosyncratic
novelty.
But and then the big thing, of course, is that his methodology is his own child there, perspectivalism, and it comes out of this covenant lordship idea, in that he's got this the normative,
he's got a big theology of lordship for sure.
So normative perspective, situational perspective, existential perspective, they're all flowing out of this thing that he says he got from Klein, where Christ is Lord, and in an ancient Near Eastern concept, this would mean that he has control, authority, and presence. And then somehow that kind of morphs into this tri-perspectivalism. And it is basically that. It's basically a way, it's a method to apply what God says as a timeless sort of principle, whether it's before the fall, after the fall, to every part of life all the time, via this lordship principle in three aspects. It's just threes, triangles all over the place, because there is this control, authority, presence, and it's also true that God is Trinitarian. And wow, that's amazing. So you've got all of these things going on, which mean that everything just. So if you're asking the question, should God's law be applied to the government explicitly, and should we become a Christian government? The answer is always yes. Yes.
He comes across as a mid-strength neo-Calvinist, more like Meta. All the governments of the world should be Christian governments.
And now what's funny about this, though, and on reflection, now, and I'm saying this charitably and kindly, I don't mean it like as in whatever, because obviously Frame's a giant of an intellect, and just the fact that he can put this together is a thing on its own. But what's crazy is he's almost more of a theonomist than any theonomist, because what you have is even like you have the strange little moment in in Klein and Barnson, where they're like squabbling, and then they both almost like pause and go, but we both agree that Frame's just off his rocket. And they both agree for the same reason. It's just because
Frame is a paradox, isn't he? Because he's got like all these theonomic sympathies, and then he calls himself a pietist and an Anabaptist.
Oh my goodness!
So pietism and Anabaptism, I think he identifies that in order to deconstruct his confessionalism rather than a separation of church and state.
Oh, yeah, but what? Yes, that's true, absolutely. But it does make more sense when you start really digging into his methodology as a perspectivalist, because what he's doing is he's taking his own methodology seriously. The problem is his methodology doesn't depend on any kind of Vossian hermeneutic or any kind of thing that we treasure as Reformed, covenant theologians. It depends upon your own preconceived kind of understanding of what ultimately theology should look like. That's the danger of this whole thing. It's extremely subjective. So what's happened is the people have taken his methodology and have basically used it to argue for whatever the heck they want to argue. You can deconstruct anything, and you can just blur it all, as Klein says, turn it all into a tri-perspectival hash, and you can do that with anything. And so it doesn't depend on the method to keep you together. It depends on whatever you're coming to that method with. Which is again very dangerous. So almost more dangerous than theonomy, because theonomy, you can say what you want about those guys. They've got a very clear process. They're transparent about their hermeneutic. They do have a hermeneutic, so you can argue with them. It's a little bit like the difference between arguing with a cessationist and a charismatic. With the charismatic, it just gets like weird. With the cessationist, you might disagree with him, but there it is. He's got his point that you're working with.
Principles,
yeah.
So I think we've gotten through the first quarter of the first chapter there, Mike, so far.
First paragraph of the first quarter of the first chapter. I think we're doing well.
This is going to take a while. But for me, that's fundamental. I mean, we're laying the foundation. We're highlighting who the conversation partners are. When a guy picks up a book,
it's getting the lay of the land, which is super
important. All these names start getting quoted.
Exactly.
Yeah. Especially if you've never entered into this before, because then you just get And people keep throwing names around like they're on whose side and who's a goodie and who's a baddie.
And then sometimes like the radical two kingdoms is a slander coming from a particular sector. You know, or antinomian, that's slander coming from a particular sector.
For sure.
You know,
for sure. Yeah.
And so it's who are you listening to that you learned that phrase from?
Exactly.
You know,
it's like if someone calls you a replacement theologian.
Yeah. Like, guess who you're talking to? I wonder. I wonder.
Marvin did say that the church replaces Israel.
Okay.
Clearly,
I mean, we all agree that that's true. But I'm just saying,
we believe in expansionist theology, not replacement theology.
Oh, no,
that the people of God are now the Jews and Gentiles who believe in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, sure.
I just agree with everyone.
I mean, that sounds like a
dispensational.
That sounds like a okay. You have to nuance that kind of death to get out of some sort of squabble with a dispensationalist.
That's right. Point is,
you're talking to a dispensationalist. Yeah, that's right, exactly. Yeah. No one else is going to bring that point up. You know. Anyway, now two goals for this thing. Let me just, so number one, we've kind of hit like just the idea is just to intro some stuff, make it a bit more accessible for anyone who wants to kind of read the book, which we would encourage just because it does get you out of the blogosphere and just gets you a little bit deeper and gets you thinking about the things which are important and are worth the effort and will help you theologically to even if you disagree with the book, you'll still straighten things out at the substructural level, which is really important. That's the first goal, just to help you do that. The second goal is to we'll talk it through in an unstructured way. I mean, we'll use broadly the book as a structure, but we're going to just do it until we get bored with it. So that's our second goal, to not get bored. We'll just keep talking, and then when we get bored, we'll ditch it. So sorry if that's
Mike's exit clause for at any point he gets bored, he's going to exit.
No. We're going to be reading Plato soon.
I promise you, I can go all day with this stuff, right? I mean, this is like, I'm worried about you guys. I'm concerned with your sanity. I don't want to box you in with this topic, but I'm happy to talk about it all day. So that's what's coming.
That's good.
All right.
I wanted to talk about Richard Niebuhr, but anyway, it's all.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we need to discuss Niebuhr and the spectrum of views? But...
We probably do. Should we quickly do that?
Yeah, sure.
No.
We're back by special request. Yeah, quickly. Niebuhr's 5 categories. It is helpful just to put just the lay of the land. You know.
Yeah.
He sort of wrote this like epic book that just basically goes, all right, how has the church thought about Christ and culture? That's the name of the book. How is it sort of he didn't like any kind of book that's going to do this is obviously going to fail again and again because it's too big of a project, but in terms of coming closest to the goal, Niebuhr's still one of the best, if not the best. Everyone refers to him, so it's to anyone that reads the book we're talking about now should read or should at least know about Niebuhr's categories, which I think is mentioned in the book. You've got the first one, which we don't care about, and that's this kind of like Christ of culture. So and but Niebuhr's right in that you do right throughout the church's history have a group of people that have just been like, yeah, we're Christians. We go to reach unreached people groups. Well, no, we don't really do that. Actually, we just if we happen to find them,
we just baptize whatever's there. So basically, here's a current events, Andre. So the Anglican Church, the Archbishop has recently had to step back because the over 50% majority of Anglicans now want to go ahead with blessing gay marriage.
Right.
They're seeing the church endorse what the world is doing.
Right. Exactly. So the world leads the agenda. It just does its thing, and the church is like, we just want to show you how Christ is basically going to make you kind of understand your own culture a bit better.
They're like Sadducees.
A little bit, yeah, liberals. I mean,
because they're sad, you see.
Nice. It feels so obvious that I should have put that together years ago. They're sad, you see.
Because they don't believe in the resurrection. So they're sad.
So we have a lot of that still, though, in the church today. I mean, New Zealand certainly that's a big.
So if the New Zealand government decides that they want to go bipartisan, the church suddenly becomes bipartisan, government oriented.
Yeah, it just never resists. It might give the appearance of resisting.
Yeah.
But yeah, it usually in its more recent forms anyway, has in liberalism, you boil Christianity down to various symbolisms, and those symbolisms can be applied.
Usually it's liberal and it's a few steps behind the world, and it quickly becomes out of date.
Yeah, and it's the best. Oh, the world shows its version of love. Good. Christ shows you a way that can magnify your view of love.
Yeah. So the world goes politically correct. The church copies, and then the world
through its symbol shows another magnifier. Yeah, and so we don't want anything to do with that. As even Niebuhr says, he's like, for people that take scripture seriously, this is not a real option. So, and then on the other extreme, you got the Christ against culture view. So this is like on the other periphery. Where you've got the Amish here. You've got people who basically just want to get out of Dodge and
Hutterites, Glorival.
Exactly, like you. It says you should not love the world. So what the heck are you doing? Get out of there. That's basically the Christ against culture view that we've seen reflected throughout the church's history, and I think that's easy enough to identify. I mean, maybe not Glorival, because I don't know if I put that in the church.
Yeah, question mark.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
They have they have the Apostles' Creed. So
okay, interesting. Yeah, well, I suppose when it gets to these fringes, there's always going to be that question mark, which is kind of the point.
But they're distinctively Hutterite in their orientation and Mennonite.
Okay, I didn't realize.
So they're deliberately and conscientiously Anabaptist.
Okay. So then you got the three views in the middle that we care about, which are the Christ over culture,
Christ above culture,
and then you got
Christ in culture and paradox, and Christ converts culture.
There we go. Or the transformer. That's where the transformationalist idea.
Yeah.
So Christ of over culture, at least, is kind of classic Roman Catholic Thomas Aquinas styled theology. The paradox is the Lutheran sort of two kingdoms idea, which is, I think, where we would come most close. Although Niebuhr is not even thinking in terms of reform two kingdoms, of course, because that's coming after. But and then he's pegging the Calvinist view, the Reformed view, as the transformation, Christ, the transformer of culture. By the way, I think Lee Irons did a great job when he said Klein's view would be, if I can remember this correctly, Christ is the creator of eschatological culture.
Bring in the eschatological perspective. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's great. It's like the sixth category that's missing. And so we can appreciate a lot of what's going on there with the Christ culture and paradox, and that we're not trying to have the one transform the other or whatever, but both are legitimate entities insofar as they go. And that you have to just hold them in this level of tension, which is part of what we're called to do as we go forward. Or even if they're not legitimate, like maybe I've gone even too far in saying that, and you have a more Augustinian sort of approach where, we're just waiting for that city to come and we're just kind of hanging in there without trying to do anything more. So those are the five categories. And the big thing to say about that, though, as it relates to the book as we go forward, is that because of Niebuhr's work, largely because of what he said there, and just what he identified as maybe the reality of the time, is that is the reformed landscape. We are, dealing, as we were saying earlier, with this dynamic. It is the prevailing paradigm in reformed thinking at the moment. Christ, the transformer of culture. Yeah. It's interesting that Niebuhr doesn't refer to Calvin at all. When he talks about Calvin, he doesn't even cite him once, and so he's just kind of using this big category idea. And so there's a big question mark as to what actually Calvin himself believed. So let's leave that aside. But it is true that it is the reigning paradigm. And here we are coming along as Reformed two kingdom guys saying, actually, there has been this other Reformed paradigm that while Niebuhr is associating it more to Lutheranism, it's actually been the way that the whole church, as well as the Reformed church originally, until the Dutch guys came along, have understood the Christ and culture issue. So that's the big pushback there. And even so, there's a way to specify it further or define it further or make it more reformed now as we bring it, build it from the basis of covenant theology, which they had never done before.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
There we go.
Right.
Good. All right. That'll help. I'll slap that in somewhere.
Nice. I'm not anyone without books in the background.
We have noticed.